Okay, so we are discussing, was it chapter 5 through 10?
That sounds right.
Okay, of part 2 of Madame Bovary. And I thought I would start by asking Grace to share the text message that she sent me shortly after our last discussion. So last time we were talking about the sails on the horizon and the longing for something indefinite that can never quite be fulfilled. And so, Grace, tell him what you shared with me.
So I went and I was talking to my husband about this phenomenon in Madame Bovary of like desiring something that's far away. And he looked at me and he goes, "Mommy, Daddy, I want something," which is something that my 3-year-old son says daily, every morning. He says, "Mommy, Daddy, I want something." And we'll say, "What do you want, baby?" And he'll say, "Something." We'll say, "Do you want, well, what do you want?" And he'll say, "Something that I like," something that I like. But like, "Do you want crackers? You love crackers?" "No." We'll go through these lists, and every time we suggest something, he's like, "No."
No. So that's our theme for Madame Bovary so far. I want
Something
something,
that I like.
something that I like. Yes, Ray.
Yeah, I just that reminded me of Renee Slottern from The Fountainhead, and how she's just such a totally passive character for the brief moment we see her, and how at one point she's just sort of idly thinking, "What would it be like to want a man?" As in just,
Oh, yeah.
just the idea of like, I'm not quite at the stage of valuing, but it would be nice to value.
Yeah. That's interesting. Okay, so Grace also mentioned to me before this was another, I think, a text I received, that she loves and hates this book, just as she expected. So I would like to hear, so that made me reflect on my love-hate relationship with this book too. So I have some thoughts about that, but do you want to share just in brief what makes you feel like you love and hate it?
In brief, I'll try. So, okay.
I think I'm putting you on the spot, so.
That's okay. I don't like any of the people in this book. I can relate to some of the things that people feel, namely Emma, in this book. But I don't like her. So, and it's funny because it's just so different than the things that I'm used to reading. But I do still love the book. I think that many of the descriptions are absolutely genius and just like so gorgeously put together. I feel almost like this, so far I don't have a sense of like a unified like theme of a story, but I do have a sense of like a mood. And I feel like Flaubert is excellent at getting across a mood. And whenever I pick up the book, I am entrenched in that mood. That mood is miserable, but he's really good at it. So I can appreciate it for that reason. So I am having a love-hate relationship with this book. I'm really enjoying reading it, but I don't know. I feel really conflicted. Does that make any sense? I feel like I just went back and forth.
100%. I relate to absolutely everything you just said. So one of the things that came up in conversation before we signed on was that Grace said, "I'm having a sort of hard time orienting myself in this novel," or I mean, I think I'm putting words in your mouth, but the idea was kind of seeing the arc that given the things we read, we've come to expect from a novel of, plot rising to a central conflict with a plot rising to a climax. And I said, oh yeah, that's interesting. I think my feeling reading this was more, rather than a symphony, we're experiencing variations on a theme. That's what it feels like to me. So
it feels almost like vignettes that kind of have similar,
that integrate,
yeah.
but not, so I feel like we had Leon and now we have Rodolphe, and you could trace, some kind of a pattern between them, but it does feel more like there's a mood, there's an idea about the world, and then there are variations on the theme of that mood and that outlook on life.
Yes, exactly. And I will say that this week I had a lot of success, I think, with hearing Shoshana's voice in my head saying he is describing, not proscribing.
I did too. I think was Ray first.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, Ray. Yeah, for me, the first time I read this and then listened to an audiobook, I just loved this novel because of just the perfection of the style and and that phrase that I had before of like it's like basking in the sun. Like I'd just be literally like when walking along, I'd smile to the point where my face would hurt. It was just so delightful. The descriptions, and for me, like I do relate to the characters a great deal. As in I do, like, just in my own life, like I've sort of faced like similar like disappointments or discouragements in these sorts of ways. I thought there was more to this person. So I relate to that tremendously, and even to be really horrible about it, that moment when Rudolph, I think that's how you pronounce his name. I'm not sure.
Rudolph.
Yeah, okay. Let's call him that. When Rudolph is walking away after having seen Madame Bovary and is thinking, "Oh, what a fine woman," and like, where's the opportunity to meet her though? But how do you get rid of her in the end? It's like I've literally had that dialogue in my head. I'm not. Oh. I'm just going to be really honest. That is true to life. That is true to life. Now, I don't go about things in the Rudolph way exactly, and I find him to be an unpleasant person fundamentally, but I had that actual thought.
Unpleasant. So another word that came up before before the tapes were rolling was douchebag. So I think unpleasant might be mild for Rodolph.
I'm not gonna quite call him that, but I know that place of just like, well, like that woman seems wonderful at first, but how it turns out.
All right. Well, we'll save a little conversation about him for. Okay,
but one thing though is that I love it the first time. This time it's like I'm actually now feeling like but this sort of amoral attitude he has, I find it deeply unpleasant in a way, like it's sort of antiseptic in an odd way. That's like even reading like Tolstoy. He's a naturalist, but there seems to be more concern about right or wrong with him on some level, some degree of judgment there, which being completely devoid of that is alien. It feels alien.
Okay, John.
I had the exact same reaction Grace and Lisa had from my first reading. My first reading, I hated it. And I've had there was a shift that occurred, I don't think until after the third assignment. And I've been watching it very closely, trying to understand why. I have a lot of ideas, but I don't have time to talk about them all. I just want to throw out a couple things. I feel exactly as Grace does, that none of the characters are lovable. None of the characters display anything that creates hero worship for me. It's the exact opposite. It's as though the characters are either going like this, ships passing in the night, we say, or they're going like this. And what we want to do in life is connect with somebody and this is your romanticism where this happens.
Mhm.
We don't see any of that happening here.
No.
Or when it does begin to happen, it comes apart. And the people who pass, they see one another, but are always misinterpreting one another.
Hmm.
And this occurs and does not go this way always, because the two parties actually don't see one another. They make contact based on their misperceptions.
Hmm.
After they make contact, they come out of disillusionment, which is what we do in life with people. They come out of disillusionment and they come apart.
Hmm.
And the last thing I'll say, I love this book now. I can't stop reading it. And it's precisely because of the art of it.
Mhm.
I cannot get over the mastery. He's might be the greatest novelist I've ever read.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, I definitely want to talk about the artistry of it. There's one scene. It's the agricultural fair or whatever they call it. I was just in awe of that scene. I mean, it's
I
not
read it
one.
probably 5 times
Oh
over.
my gosh,
I was
it's
like, are you
amazing.
serious?
Yeah, it's hilarious, and it's so vividly that the woman who wins the prize and is just like blinking in the sun, no idea what's going on, and her face is more shriveled than an apple. I just, but then a shriveled apple. You know, we used to, I don't know, in grade school, I don't know if anybody else did this too, but we used to dry apples and make faces out of them. So I just remember that image so very well. Okay, Shoshana.
Okay. I mean, I think everything that people are saying makes sense because this book doesn't give you the pleasures of a lot of other books that we properly admire. But here's the thing. Within the book, even though we don't have a lot of admirable characters, Emma is a reader and she has read some good books.
Mhm.
So in a way, we've got the universe of the good books in the novel, even
Mhm.
though the characters in the novel they're not Hugo characters, they're not Scott characters, but it's as if that's what's in the novel that gives you part of that universe. Although, boy, Emma does not do very well with her reading. You know,
No.
she gets the wrong things out of her reading, but
Yeah.
but we're the readers and we can know something of what she ought to be getting out of it. So in a way, she's a bad reader.
Yeah.
But we don't have to be bad readers of this book, and we can hold a whole context better than Emma does. And
Mhm.
by the way, there's one sort of positive character, that young teenager, Justin,
Mm.
who's fond of her.
Mm.
I'm just saying, you know, and of course he's a minor character, but
Yeah.
it's sort of as if he stands out. Yeah, you know, he's someone who, and of course, once
Set his head on straight.
yeah, but when you proceed through the book, you see what his role in the story
Mm.
is.
Mm.
But nonetheless, you know, there he is, and all the other people that you're looking at, you know, is this possibly a good person? Well, no, this one's stupid, this one's vicious, this one's a coward, and you know, including the one who's up there, right, kind of as I guess, a contrast for Emma with Omé. Okay.
Mhm.
And if you find yourself, this is the last thing I'll say, if you find yourself kind of bored by him, it's as if on the one hand, he looks like the anti-Emma, but he's actually a lot like Emma.
Mm. Oh, that
Yeah.
article he
Yeah.
wrote,
Yeah.
that was dreamy.
Yeah.
Bear no resemblance to reality.
Yeah. Yeah. So sort of, it's not exactly as if he's the male counterpart to
Mhm.
Emma, but he's kind of a less appealing version of
Yeah.
Emma, but the two of them have, you know,
Hmm.
similar qualities. And I think that what you said about this being a great novel, that's sort of what Flaubert does, is he keeps putting things in to help you be a good reader.
Yeah,
You know,
I guess I have a hard time I see what you're saying about them, but I have a hard time putting them together because she seems so profoundly earnest, foolish,
Mhm.
but earnest, and he just seems full of
Not that
himself
way.
and you know, like he's always endeavoring to show off. There was that great, brilliant line where it says he addresses Charles as doctor, as if saying doctor bestows some honor upon himself. He's just
I
so,
love that.
he's so pretentious.
Mhm.
And Emma doesn't seem pretentious in the way
Right.
we usually use the word.
This is just a total aside, just a little moment that I was like, that's funny. With Ome, there's the descriptive line when he's walking away and Flaubert describes him as just taking up a lot of space with his big coat. I'm like, he just wants to take up space.
He just wants to take up space. Okay,
Emma also wants to take up space. She basically thinks that the world revolves around her, or ought to, and if it doesn't, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
You know, she can't, her daughter doesn't count for her.
No.
You know, other people's interests don't count for her. It's as if they're all well, she thinks that it's as if other people don't have their own lives. And which is the way that Ome looks at it. You know, he's the son and everybody else is around him. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's one of the reasons we don't like either one of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Another prediction I made before we started was that we were going to have far too much to talk about than we would have time for. And I raised one question about why we love and hate this novel, and we're 20 minutes in. And so I still desperately want to hear what everybody else has to say. I'll have to ask you to keep your comments relatively short because there's a lot more that I would like to get to. And I'm going to selfishly take a host privilege and briefly say my own feeling about it too, which is that I was thinking of, okay, so Ray confessed last week to identifying with Emma, which I think is a safer confession than identifying with Rodolphe. but I was thinking about that, and I think of Emma as conveying, as capturing a certain mood that many of us can relate to, especially any idealist romanticist, of feeling sort of overwhelmed by tedium at any given moment. Now, we can have a hopeless, fatalistic idea of that, which seems to be the atmosphere of this novel. I don't think too many of us, I hope, share that perspective, but the mood itself we can relate to, and he's so effective at communicating that mood. So I love that aspect of it. And then that brought to mind the Ayn Rand saying of Dominique in the Fountainhead that she's Ayn Rand in a bad mood. And I thought, okay, so it would be as if it was a novel of only Dominique with no prospect of Rourke on the horizon and no prospect of redemption, just conveying that mood. So there's a great value in that, and I enjoy that, but the disappointment is not having the prospect of something better. So, you know, not liking any of the characters, like you said. Also, Ray, if you want to make Fountainhead connections, how about Wynand and his love interests? So there's a lot of very abrupt disillusionment going on. Am I as pretty as Maggie Kelly? Okay, so a little side reference for people who know it. Okay, so quickly, Joseph, you want to call in people and we'll
Mary Elaine.
Well, I love the beautiful descriptive language. I just am enjoying that thoroughly. And one scene that stood out for me was when she went to talk to, was it the cure? Is that what it's called? Because she was unhappy. And so, I mean, obviously the complete uselessness and futility of religion. He never even really heard her say, I'm unhappy, but also the description of his greasy cassock and the buttons and you know, and that's the way it kind of was at that time. He didn't have a washing machine and 4 extra cassocks, but it was just so
yeah.
So, yeah.
That seemed the first on my list. So since you mentioned it, so there's the grease spots and tobacco on his chest, but then he has to be the least spiritual religious figure I have ever encountered. So these two exchanges I just have to share. How are you? He added. Not well, Emma answered. I'm suffering. She is suffering, soul sickness, deep in her soul. His answer, well, so am I, he answered. These first hot spells weaken one terribly, don't they? So speaking at cross purposes, but he seems to have no capacity to even recognize that there is such thing as a soul. And she's going to him to make this soulful confession. And then, but Emma continued, and the corners of her mouth twitched as she spoke. What about those, monsieur, who have bread and who don't have, what's the end of that sentence? Spiritual fulfillment, love, something of the soul. Fire in the winter, said the priest. My God, that was just genius perfection.
So perfectly written. But I wanted to say also, maybe I'm in the minority here, but I like Emma because I see her as someone who has potential in a different world. I mean, none of the women in this small town have any chance at anything. And I'm really like, in the Western world today, I really have no use for feminism, but at that time, what life was possible to her? And is this like the late 19th century, mid 19th century? I mean, I just read, maybe this is stuck in my mind, and I'll wrap here. I just read Cristino de Stefano's biography of Maria Montessori, and the way Maria Montessori's life was impacted by the position of women at the time she lived was huge. I mean, that was why she had to give up her son. She couldn't have a career and have a son and a marriage. So
it's just so mixed here, because there are those great lines about her envy of Rodolphe because he has freedom. Yeah. And how does he use that freedom? And how does she want to use that freedom? There's no noble, she just doesn't have a noble purpose for the exercise of that freedom. But you do still, I too, in this section, felt a lot more sympathy for her than I think I did early on, or maybe on my first reading. Again, I think I was better this time at adopting that perspective that he's not really asking us to sympathize with her or not. I think the within the universe of this novel, it's her longings that we're focused on. So we relate to her to that extent. But the capacity that you described, it's in her eyes. We could go back and inventory all the descriptions of her eyes. I feel like every time we get to her eyes, we see the capacity for depth of soul within her. Her eyes are focused and dark, and those lashes fringing. And there was that early scene where we saw Charles just reflected in them in miniature. There's just something, she's marked in some way as having some substance, but she's so lost in terms of fulfillment of whatever that capacity is. Okay.
Kathleen.
Good morning, everyone. So I also have a love-hate relationship with this book. When I read it, I'm definitely feel like I really want to know what happens next. It does feel like the story arc is a little slow to develop, but I do have to vent for a minute about Emma. I know we're going to get to this, but the scene where she pushes her daughter into the dresser, oh my goodness. So I feel differently. I don't have any empathy or sympathy for this woman. Every time I start to feel a little twinge of empathy or sympathy, she does something really stupid, or awful, like pushing her daughter. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I am enjoying the book, but
Good.
I don't know about Emma.
Yes, I definitely wanted to talk about that scene. Now, what was interesting for me is that I so deeply adopted the perspective that Ray was encouraging last time that I wouldn't, I got my little doggy behind me here. I would be appalled if anybody treated my dog the way she treated her daughter. But I felt separate from that judgment when I was reading that scene. The focus for Flaubert, the focus for within this novel seems more on her desperation and her, kind of chomping at the bit of her life, or just, trying to break out of this. And her daughter is one of those things. It is in reality absolutely horrible, but I didn't feel the horror of it reading that scene, taking the perspective of the novel.
For me, I was like as awful as it is, I was like, that fits with my understanding of her relationship to the responsibilities in her life.
Yeah, her daughter is a burden to her. It's not a source of joy. She doesn't know where to find the joy.
So she's resentful of that burden. She wants to push it away.
Yeah, but I guess I think I'm being clear. Taking that scene from my universe, it's absolutely horrific.
Completely.
Taking that scene from within the universe of the novel, it feels like, the way the baby falls is that I forget what she says, but she expresses some frustration, and the gesture of her frustration knocks the baby down and the baby cuts her cheek. So this is Emma. She's just acting out her disillusionment with the world, and there's terrible consequences when she does that. Okay, quickly, Stefan.
Well, I just want to say hi to everybody. It's been a couple weeks. So yeah, you got to understand, like, when I'm reading this, I'm in the dark. I don't know what you guys are thinking.
Right.
And I'm like, I don't understand why they have me reading this novel. So I had to plow through. I had like 3 days to catch up. So I guess I just want to say the one hint that I got that there was some sort of hope, something that I liked. I think it was the chemist, who I kind of like in a way. I know but his whole idea that he can separate philosophy and stories. Mm-hmm. And that gave me some hint into, I think that was him. Is that not him, or?
No, it is him, but I wouldn't look to Home for philosophic hope.
No, right. But just the fact that he can do that, it's just like, I don't know, that just gave me, I just want to say about her, because there's so much in my mind and I didn't talk to you guys about it. So I just want to say very briefly.
Yeah.
It's like, she's like, I don't understand why I'm so upset, but keeps doing things. Like, she has, like we said, she's so well read, and she was interested in things. And that's what I liked about her. Mm-hmm. She was curious. She reminded me of Tess a little bit, in the sense that she was like a pagan. She was kind of, irreligious in the traditional sense. And I like that. But then I know women like this, and I'll sit and talk with them, and we'll have these great discussions, and they'll be like, this is the kind of person I want to be with, the kind of life I want to have. And then when I see them act, it's like their actions just completely destroy all that. And that's what Emma does.
So briefly, and you can catch up on the videos if you want to, otherwise you'll just get, absorbed over time. But basically the way we've described her is that she's filled with a longing that we can sort of admire and relate to and connect with. But the fulfillment of that longing is something vague and always distant, and whatever's present in her life seems to be unfulfilling. So it's Shoshana referenced this scene where she wanted 5 things at once, and all of them were contradictory with each other. And it's just, she's looking for something to relieve the boredom and tedium of her life, but she's so reckless and foolish in the way imprudent in the way she tries to fulfill it. Mm-hmm. John, we can take a quick comment, but we have to get to the actual story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One thing that might help as an answer to why you felt that the scene with Bertha inadvertently getting the cut on the cheek as a result of Emma's emotions, her frustration. I'm having a very strong reaction all through the book that's very different from what I'm hearing from everyone else. Remember before I said there's no one attractive, but I am very moved. I am very sympathetic to all the characters. I like Omes. I like all these imperfect people. And I come back to my point about the art. It's Flaubert's art. These are not cartoons. You cannot dismiss them. Flaubert has put human beings on the page that we know from real life. And that is extremely moving. The reason the scene with the child holds you is because of the intensity of the real situation Flaubert has chosen to depict there that Emma is caught in. And you can't dismiss it as she did a bad act. It's not that simple. Life isn't that simple.
I do agree that's how, I mean, even later when so this is after she feels remorse about what she did once she sees the consequences of it. But nevertheless, her next thought about the child is she's really ugly. You know, and then my goodness, that baby is ugly. And again, my feeling was not that she's being judged for that, but yeah, this is the situation she's caught in, is what it felt like for me. So it's very difficult because we want, of course, to judge that, but that's just not what we're being asked to do in the novel.
Flaubert captures the complexity of human beings.
Well, I don't always agree with the way he sees that complexity. I would judge someone for pushing their baby and having it cut its cheek, but that's a very separate issue, and not what I want from the experience of reading the novel. That's just for me to make that judgment separately, integrating it with everything else I know outside of the context of the novel. Okay, so one of the main things I wanted to talk about, since we better get down to main things quickly, was the difference in Emma's relationship with Léon and with Rodolphe. So last time I was describing, I had a tendency to view with skepticism and suspicion the potential for any real connection with Léon, and I think, Grace, you did too. I do, in contrast to Rodolphe, see the difference, but I honestly think, because I've read the book before, it was kind of lumping them together as this sequence of illusions of the potential for romance that I was sort of dismissive of it. But there's definitely a difference. And so there's the scene with her farewell with Léon was very touching, and I think an expression of earnest emotion and loss. And so, I mean, the two things that stood out to me there were, first, him saying he wants to kiss Berthe, give her, I just felt like, well, that is fulfilling his longing to express his love to Emma, and he has to, use the baby as a surrogate there. And also, this line was very beautiful. Léon enclosed her hand in his, and the very substance of his entire being seemed to pour into his moist palm. That sounds very earnest to me. So there was, I think, something real about the connection there. And then, by contrast, we're introduced, as Ray already reminded us, to Rodolphe, who, upon meeting her, immediately thinks about how easy it will be to seduce her, and how the difficulty may lie in getting rid of her later. And then every interaction between them seemed calculating, like an act. So the other thing that came up before this is Joseph made reference to the Tinder Swindler. I don't know if anybody watched that or heard about that series on, I think it was on Netflix, but it was just about somebody with a romance Ponzi scheme, basically, who has mastered the art of seducing women and uses it to get money from one that he then uses to convince the next that he's rich, and so on. So there's no money scheme here, but it is a scheme of seduction, no doubt. So anybody have something to say? I mean,
Rodolphe is a douchebag.
tell us how you really feel.
The minute that I like something about the way that his clothes were described, I was like, that guy sucks. And then he comes on the scene and he starts describing how he's gonna like seduce her, and I'm like, yep, I knew it, that guy sucks. And how he's like, the trouble will be just getting rid of her after. I'm like, that's like an insecure woman's number one fear, like that someone is thinking that about them while like pursuing a relationship with them, or at least I can imagine it would be. I don't know. Well, everything about him, just like, I just feel like he's slimy, he's gross, I hate him. But that's me. That's not like my, mature analysis of
I think that's mature analysis. So what's interesting is that he uses some of the same language that Leon did with, I mean, similar related language, but when he says, well, he said, don't you know that there are certain souls in perpetual torment? They are constantly in need of either a dream or some occupation. To me, when he was saying that, it felt like, oh, I know this gets women. If I use that line, I've got to read on her. This will speak directly to Emma and fulfill that
you
thing.
Feel like he's said all of this stuff before. He's just an actor reading a script. Whereas if Leon were to say that, you would take it as being earnest.
Yeah, that's how I saw it. Right?
Yeah, well, I completely agree with Grace's analysis of him being a sleaze, but I think it is important to notice just how much of a professional he is.
Professional? He's really good. He's really good at it.
It's just like, I think the male part of the audience here has something to learn.
You put to better purposes, I hope.
But all joking aside, it just no, just as a single man who's met women and tried to find opportunities to get into relationships, it's like, well, there are times where you have to be a bit calculating and find opportunities, and I don't know, these sorts of thoughts are like, yeah, that's I see that. Obviously, just as an asterisk here, when I said I had that thought about that was like where it was just like, yeah, how do I get rid of her? It's like, I didn't pursue those situations. Okay, I didn't pursue that. Like, that was a sign of like, yeah, I'm getting anticipatory regret. Let's not go down that.
Anticipatory regret is a fantastic phrase.
Yeah. So
don't worry. We like you too much to have taken that too seriously.
Yeah. So and he is he's just one other detail about him, which is like the worst nightmare for women, is the moment that he sees that, oh yeah, she's desperately in love with me, she needs me, I can just relax now, lay off, like I don't need to do too much for this at this point.
Ride this out.
She's on the hook.
Which is an active fear that I've known women to have. So
yeah, because it was all a conquest. Conquest 1 doesn't have to do the work.
I will say one thing to humanize him a bit is he's not just looking for, about to use vulgar language, he's not just looking for a lay. As in there is a certain, like, he likes the romance, he likes the tenderness, he appreciates how nubile and earnest her affection is, not maybe quite in the way you'd want to, but he's not like He's
Right.
not one of these creeps that's like counting how many virginities have I taken
No,
or
no.
something. He's a guy who's like, yeah, I do like romance. It just,
I know it gets
only
old
so
after
much,
a while.
it's a nice sport. So,
Yeah.
no. As
Yeah,
a sport, not in the way of like I'm trying to get like little marks on my bedpost, but like
Right.
it's enjoyable. I like doing this activity. It's a great way to you get real positive feelings out of it. It's more like a Netflix show that you get excited about.
Yeah.
And you might forget about for a couple of weeks and then come back to, like you did at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says, but she was so pretty. He had had few mistresses as unspoiled as she was. This love without guile was something new to him. It had taken him out of his free and easy ways, flattered his pride, and quickened his sensuality. So there is something specifically about her that he is especially drawn to, but it's not enough to, to
Keep him around in a meaningful way.
keep him around. Or what was the line? I'm not one of those. He's not. Oh, with the suggested duel with Charles. Like, I'm not one of those people dying with jealousy. He was not one of those people dying with jealousy. That's not going to happen. The attachment's not that deep.
Mm-mm.
The feeling only goes down so far. To put the
right.
down in the most grotesque way possible.
But you described him as a professional, so I did enjoy watching the escalation in his technique. So, it starts with little hints and suggestions, and then he becomes more explicit about kind of declarations of affection for her. And then there's a little speech on morality to put aside any thoughts she might have of this being an inappropriate thing for her to engage in. And then the seduction scene itself, it's painful to watch, but he's very effective. He knows when to back down and when to turn the feelings on her and almost make her feel, I don't know, guilty.
Yeah.
So yes, he is a professional, no doubt. Shoshana.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the way that they conduct their relationship after it gets started. I mean, they've got this whole system with throwing pebbles at the window. What Charles sleeps very soundly, I don't know, and that Emma sneaks out of bed. I mean, the whole thing, this is not exactly like a date.
No.
It's almost more as if the whole thing is more like a story than or a dream than a relationship, because she's sleeping and so I gather that he's probably done this before.
Oh yeah.
But the fact that he's even got a system like that, it's not just the lines that he says, but okay, this is how we'll handle it. Yeah. I'm not gonna go so far as to arrange a trip or pay rent someplace. No, just all I need are a few good pebbles, and that's it. So it's
a text message that says, "You up?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that brings up another thing I wanted to discuss, which is Emma's relationship with him, or her attitude toward him. She doesn't even seem very drawn to him from the start. It's only when she starts to associate him with the Marquis or with that world that he starts to have some appeal to her. And then he wears down her resistance, but it does take some effort from him. And it felt very much so. And I think, and I'd like to hear what other people have to say, but in contrast with Leon, it felt like it really was, this is somebody who can fulfill the kind of literary romantic fantasies that I had. So after they sleep together the first time, she comes away and she says, I have a lover. It's an abstracted thing that he is fulfilling for her. It doesn't seem to be about him in particular at all. So
She's finally one of the ladies from her novels.
And he could be anybody.
Yeah.
So he preys on her desires, and then for her, she just kind of submits to that. And then the only appeal of it is that now she is an adulteress. The appeal seems to be in being an adulteress, not in having Rodolphe in particular. Does that make sense to other people?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah, he's
And
okay.
can I just say, the thing that I found so deeply sad, I want to see if I can find the line, when he starts to kind of pull back from her and she can tell. And because she can tell that he's pulling back from her, she becomes more attached to him and starts laying on the tenderness and the sweetness even more. And then that act in itself kind of causes him to come further and further away from her. That hurt to read.
Yeah.
That was like real, like seeing someone, like knowing that a relationship is coming to an end, trying with every ounce of their being to pour as much sweetness into that person to try to get them to stay, and having it just have the opposite effect. That was painful to read. I wish I could find the line.
I bet I could find it. Okay, so I'll just.
Oh, I found it.
Okay, go ahead.
I think this is it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So the great love affair in which she had plunged seemed to diminish under her like the water of a river being absorbed into its own bed.
That's a great
And
line.
she began to see slime at the bottom. She didn't want to believe it and redoubled her tenderness. Rodolphe hid his indifference less and less. It hurts.
Yeah.
That felt like very real, like seeing the slime at the bottom where you thought that there was a beautiful, clear, rushing river.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so, okay, and someone brought up the artistry of it. There were so many lines in here. What she gets out of this is the thrill of a departure from tedium. It's excitement. It's something forbidden and dangerous and thrilling, and that has those elements of the novels that she's read. And those parts are described in a very compelling and real way. So I loved this line so much. All was silent. Gentleness seemed to emanate from the trees. She could feel her heart beating again and the blood circulating like a milky river through her body. And then the sound she hears off in the distance, it mingled like music with the waning vibrations of her throbbing nerves. So it's as if at least her nerves are throbbing and her blood is flowing for the first time, when she's been kind of like the Walking Dead in her ordinary life. Ray.
Yeah, I want to. I believe you're really right that like a major part of that relationship is her view of that relationship, is that, you know, that sort of like, oh, now I'm one of these romantic heroines and all of that. I think that does capture a big part of it, and she doesn't quite fully see Rudolph as a person. But I will say I think there is actually also, you know, like she actually enjoys it to a degree. Like there is actually like, no, like, hey,
the blood is flowing.
Fun. You know, I imagine that's something that she's, you know, you can, from the post-coital scene, you can have that implication that she actually enjoyed it for once, presumably. It's not just like as a contrast to like the way she's like being virtuous with Leon. And like being virtuous, being good, that's just a lie to make yourself feel better. To make yourself, to add to your vanity, you know, that's there's nothing there. It's hollow as a jug. And with this, like there is an actual excitement in which she's a real excitement of being in a relationship with someone who's at least appears romantic, and to feel those emotions dry up and go away is like, that's a real thing she's losing. It's not just illusion. It's not just vanity.
No, that's definitely true. And it reminds me of the scene that you drew attention to from the ball with the men who break horses and women, that there's it sounded sort of brutal and inhuman in a sense, but it also sounded like alive and seductive. And so she feels I mean, there's so many beautiful, the scenes where she appears in his room. I mean, there's a
spring
sensual
morning,
quality to those scenes. I mean, I won't read the whole section, but after she walks through the field, Rodolphe would still be sleeping at that hour, and it was as if a spring morning had come into his bedroom. What an amazing line. And I could almost, like, it just evokes sense and feelings of somebody coming into the room. And then also through the yellow curtains along the windows, a heavy light softly penetrated. Emma blinked, groping her way, while the drops of dew on her hair resembled a topaz halo around her face. So that there are those images of just beautiful, sensual qualities contrasted with the complete dreariness of her daily existence. So I think, Ray, we're saying the same thing. We agree that she's not in love, but she's experiencing a thrill that she's been seeking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just wanted to make it clear. There's a there for her, unlike with Virtue, or unlike something like, I don't know, Peter Keating would feel.
Yes.
Or one of these other second-handed characters.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and she has always, like, I think this was explicitly stated towards the beginning of the novel, she is invested in seeking out emotion. Like, she doesn't have a sense of like the things that lead to emotions or anything. She wants emotions. So she doesn't have them because she's so bored. And then, enter Rodolphe, and she has this excitement. That's what she wants. She wants the excitement. So she has everything she's wanted up until this point. And that is
the hazard with Rodolphe is that it's going to come to an end. We know from the beginning. So it's going to dry up and she's going to be left with the slime. And 2, there's a phoniness to it. So there is something real, but there's also a falseness and an exploitation going on that we're conscious of at the same time.
Right.
Okay. What else do we want to discuss here? Well, I mean, I think that's page 139 in my version. Okay, I have a question about this. So I just laughed so hard at this scene of Rodolphe engaged in his seduction while the prizes are being given out at the the medals are being given out, and the juxtaposition of, let's see. Did I know that I would be spending today with you? 70 francs. I wanted to go off 100 times, but I've kept by your side, stayed with you. Manures, as I will remain this evening, tomorrow, all the other days of my life. Now, what is he doing? What is Flaubert doing there? Because that feels very judgmental and evaluative to put those things side by side. It's certainly manures. We go from declarations of romance to manures. Ray.
Yeah, this is a very good scene. What I guess my tentative interpretation of it is well, what's the essence of the big speech that's being given, of like, okay, like here we are saying all these great big words that are kind of empty, kind of vague, to make ourselves seem self-important and to add to our bourgeois complacency. That's the essence of that, and it's somewhat articulate. It's a good speech in a certain way. Actually, just culturally, it's like, God, I wish a politician could say something like this today. It could be this good at it. But and then we have him who's just saying all these words about being better than the common mass, and like I'm so we have to feel so deeply, and love, it's so much beyond everything else. Like it's a lot of hot air coming from him. I feel like that contrast I have two hypotheses, I guess you could say. Is one is that it's showing both of these are hot air. That this is just that when that there's not really any big difference between Rudolph saying his speech and the speech downstairs and the speech that Homais gives in his little article. That it's all just empty words and sentimental exaggeration, sort of equivalence. The other thing that comes to my mind is also like, even in this scene of sentimental affection, here's like bourgeois life creeping in nonstop. Here it is, the constant interruption.
Okay, but so that's how I saw it too, but it feels much more judgmental than other parts of the novel, and then it feels more judgmental than the basic approach we've been taking with the novel. So for example, I mean, this has to be tongue-in-cheek. This has to be sarcastic. Monsieur Leovin sat down again, Monsieur de Roserais, I don't know how to say it, beginning a new speech. He was not quite as his was not quite as flowery as the counselor's, but this was compensated for by a more positive style, that is, by a more specialized knowledge and more exalted reflections. Thus, praise of the government was stressed less, and religion and agriculture more. Now, this is an agricultural fair. A flowery speech of praise for the government seems a little out of place here. So compensated for by a more positive style, by something more relevant to what's happening here. It sounded sarcastic and critical to me. And much of this scene felt like he's having fun with these people. It didn't feel as straightforward depictions of life, of this cast of characters without judgment.
Oh, well, one thing is in terms of judgment, I mean, everything Homais says is a judgment in that sense.
Yeah.
Everything he bloviates on is meant to be like, look at that jackass.
Look at that fool.
And so like, I think he does find it funny how empty these words are, how grandiose it is. He's getting a laugh out of it, but he's not. But I think it's from the perspective of, oh, isn't that funny? An Olympian god looking down on humanity and seeing, oh, isn't that quaint? These little things that they do and how they make themselves seem important. These ants.
That's interesting. They make themselves feel important, but yet Emma's longing for something important is treated with more sympathy and seriousness.
Flaubert he's much more sympathetic. He's not saying that's quite maybe better, because I don't again, morality isn't quite the right word for it, but he's certainly much more sympathetic. Like Homais he hates. Homais he wants to cut his belly open with a box cutter. Since
we're talking about Homais and that article that he wrote, I have to select one to emphasize one juxtaposition in particular. The fireworks had been sent in care of Monsieur Tuvache, who had locked them in his cellar in an excess of caution, and so the humid powder barely ignited. The principal display, which was to be a dragon biting its tail, failed completely. An occasional lone Rome candle would go off to a clamor from the gaping mass. Okay, and then in the article, in the evening, a brilliant fireworks display suddenly illuminated the heavens. It was a veritable kaleidoscope, a setting for an opera. For a moment, our little town believed itself transported to the heart of an Arabian Nights dream. That, I mean, if you wanted to pull two lines juxtaposed to show the idea that writers romanticize what is not there, that would be a great one to
Yeah,
use.
actually, another one I just have to mention is in War and Peace. There's a scene where the character's father dies, and he doesn't know his father because he's technically a bastard.
Mhm.
That character, and it's incredibly awkward and fumbling and unspiritual. And then you have another character gossiping about it later, like, "Oh God, just the tears that came through their eyes and the deepest
Oh.
affection between father and son." It was just, it was just
Mhm.
beautiful. Tolstoy is godlike.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. Other things people wanted to comment on. I'm gonna look through my notes for a minute and see what else I want to make sure we. Well, I wanted to talk about when she.
Wendy's got her hand up.
Oh, sure.
I wanted to talk about a reaction I had, which I was kind of surprised by,
Mhm.
and that was her whole romance with Rodolphe. That to me, in some ways, it was kind of a relief that it was, even though from the very beginning it's shown to us what his character is, and that the whole thing of how will I get rid of her, and that there isn't any hope for any real happiness here, but that it was just a moment of what she thought she wanted, of enjoyment in life, and I just happiness for her, that she would have that just for a moment, even if it was kind of self-deceptive, and not going to last, not going to be real. And I feel like I felt that way with Charles a little bit when he was when we saw everything from his perspective, when he fell in love with Emma. And that I was happy after the misery that we see he's in, that I was happy for him that he would, even though then immediately we're just, we find out that this isn't going to be happiness, long term. This isn't, she doesn't return his feelings. I don't know. And I feel like that it's something it's saying about life and about reality, that just this momentary, that's all that there is, just this brief moment kind of, that's not real, but that they could be enjoy life just for this moment, but only if they're deceived.
So you're seeing a parallel. So it's between Charles falling for Emma and Emma falling for Rodolphe. It seems like Charles is fulfilled by Emma. That seems that's what I see as the essential difference between them. Emma is all Charles needs. He does feel fulfilled by her. We see him as being deceived and naive because he doesn't, he buys her the damn horse. God. The horse was just a way for Rodolphe to take her off and seduce her, and he just handed her over to him and then buys her a horse, thinking that's
You looked so happy when you came back from riding a horse. Here's your own horse.
Oh dear.
I almost felt like Rudolph was going to say, like, after that happens, like, he really takes the fun out of this.
Yeah. There's no challenge in it anymore. So it's there. The difference between them is that Charles doesn't have the longings that Emma does. And Emma, so he does, when he falls for Emma, his life was truly miserable. He was almost abused by mother and first wife. And Emma seems to him someone beautiful and appealing, and then she just is chronically unfulfilled, especially by him, because his desires exist on that very low plane, and he doesn't have any longings for romance and adventure and something above and beyond dreary, tedious daily existence. To him, it's not tedious. It's just life as he knows and enjoys it.
I keep thinking about Ray last week saying that there are happy pigs, but look at this sad philosopher. He's just the happy pig.
He's the happy pig. So what the other thing I was going to bring up from the end of the reading was just as Rodolphe's attentions start to wane and she begins to have regrets, the effect that has on her, and also the connection of the letter from her father and what feelings the letter from her father evokes in her. My impression was that the letter from her father reminded her of a time when all seemed hopeful ahead of her, where, you know, the dreams she read in books seemed like something that would be achieved in life. And now the more time goes on, the more she begins to see that is something that can't be fulfilled, or that isn't being fulfilled. She feels unfulfilled and wants, likes the idea sentimentally of going back to the time when she still believed that could all be true. And that seems to drive her again into a little bit of madness, but she seems kind of crazy at the end of this chapter.
And there's something that I wanted to bring up. So like this idea of her having a lover, being involved in an adulterous affair, like the women that she's read about. She wants that. She wants to be like these women in these books. That's like, she wants that to be a part of her identity. And so she has that, and she starts to see it kind of slip away. And that's when she tries to grip onto it tighter, like what I was talking about earlier, trying to like redouble her tenderness for him. So that she can keep that as a part of the way that she sees herself, her identity. And it's like this desperate clutching for that, but she can still see it kind of withering away. And then when she gets the letter, she's reminded of, her old life and kind of what we've seen with her before. That life is far away and distant, and because it's distant, that sounds great. She can't have it, so that's what she wants. And then there's that scene right after she reads the letter of like going to her daughter and taking care of her for once. And I saw that as almost, and maybe you can help me make sense of it, but I saw that as almost like in the absence of this part of her identity that she's so excited about that she can see slipping away. She's like just searching for something else, so that for once having a daughter is convenient, because then she can maybe look for that as a source of meaning when this is slipping away. Or maybe I'm just looking too far into it.
Well, here's basically how I saw it, and then anybody else can comment. At first, I thought the letter was just the aspect of the far away, like now she can romanticize her childhood. But then there were lines that stressed that she had been so happy in those days of freedom and hope filled with illusions. So that's what she's longing for, is the days when she could still be filled with illusions. And then when she first married Charles, he was an illusion. I think she truly believed he was going to fulfill those longings for her, because she's seeking excitement. And at the time, he was something exotic and different from the world she knew, and was taking her away to a life of romance. And then it's just very quickly she sees that Charles isn't the man Charles is not going to bring her life excitement. And so it becomes dreary. Now, she feels Rodolphe's affection slipping away. She tries to summon her virtue, I guess, and be the dutiful wife and the loving mother, which is not at all, none of these are real and natural to her. And then Rodolphe sees it and comments that it'll pass, it's a mood. And I thought, yeah, he's right. It's
Probably
true.
true. Yeah.
It will pass. It's a mood, as long as it's not bringing her excitement.
Mhm.
As soon as she discovers again that it feels unfulfilling to her, she'll be on to the next source of excitement.
Right. So you think that the role of the letter is to
bring back, is to emphasize her discovery that life is disillusionment, that
because what was
yeah.
good back then was that she had illusions.
Yeah, isn't that sad?
Okay. Yeah, that sucks.
That's terrible. What was good about life is that illusions were still possible, and life is proving to her that you even so all you had were illusions, and you lose even those.
As time goes on, naturally the illusions fall away. So naturally your enjoyment of life falls away too.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, what I was thinking seemed to fall in line with the question that you posed, but now I'm worried that I like steered the conversation away from
No, I just yeah, I mean, it says she even asked herself why she loathed Charles so, and if it would not be better to be able to love him.
I mean, yeah, that would be better.
That sounds like a doomed prospect, even in the phrasing of the
right. Yeah. It's like, yeah, to love your husband, that would be better,
if I could
but
love
like
my
the
husband?
fact that you're asking that question.
Makes it feel pretty hopeless.
Yeah.
John?
I just want to point out part of the art. I was just blown away by this, that Emma has spent all of the novel so far trying to figure out how to exist in an unhappy marriage and aware of the social mores.
Mm-hmm.
I see she and Leon as genuinely falling in love with one another. So there's that difference. I see very, very strong relationship between them. Leon is extremely respectful, thinking Emma does not return his feelings. In fact, she does, but she's caught in this marriage and she can't make the leap to being unfaithful to Charles.
Mm-hmm.
She struggles for a long time with Rodolphe to do the same. She resists the surrender that occurs in the forest.
Mm-hmm.
She's being pulled towards it, but she resists it. Chapter 9 is that chapter. In chapter 9, Emma does a 180-degree turn. She surrenders to the voices of the women who have committed adultery, and she celebrates that she has become one of them. Do you remember where I'm referring to?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So 180-degree turn, chapter 9. There are 34 chapters in this book. Half of 34 is 17. Chapter 9 is the 18th chapter.
Mm.
So she does this 180-degree turn exactly on the first chapter of the second half. I believe Flaubert saw that. I'm amazed.
I don't. Well, let's see.
It's just an observation. It's a piece of fact.
Yeah.
That you can weigh or not. I weigh it.
Yeah. What I'm wondering is, what is the nature of the turn? Because it felt to me like she was resistant. She gave in. It was thrilling. It gave her something to occupy her thoughts. It gave her some kind of the identity she was seeking. And it was already, I don't know if this is a helpful way of putting it, but it just feels to me like, well, it was already done. She did give in. And so now this is the source of excitement in her life. So I guess this is a separate point from the timing issue, but just, I don't know if I quite see it as a 180-degree turn. It felt passive and like she's just groping at another source of fulfillment, and the potential sources of fulfillment kind of fall in her path, and she doesn't take a very active role in discriminating what she's going to pursue and what she isn't. She just kind of longs for the adventure, then tries to resume her life of virtue, completely resents it, elbows her child, wants to kill her husband, wants to push him out of the window. I mean, I just think of her as, fighting against the environment she's in, but not rather than seeking something.
When I say turn, Lisa, I don't mean that I mean that she's finally exploded from the constraint she was in.
Yeah.
She has been resisting releasing that explosion. She doesn't.
Yeah.
She comes close with Bertha and there's an accident, but she finally lets loose with Rodolphe.
Yeah.
And the mental psychological change in her as a result of the passion is
we'll see. We'll see what happens next. Yeah.
Yes.
Stefan.
You'll have to forgive me if my analysis is wrong, just because I did speed through this. I'm going to be a lot more active and focused on the next one. But it seemed to me that there was no resistance there. If Leon would have reciprocated, I think she would have immediately cheated.
If he had pursued her.
Yeah. And she just made it clear from the beginning that her husband was dull, that she was looking for excitement. And then I wonder how quickly would her relationship with Leon disintegrated, because this isn't a woman she's a thrill seeker. So I don't see her ever, settling down. So, to say the least.
No, it's the white sails on the horizon. There's always, Ray?
Sounds right to me.
Yeah. One thing I just want to point out, just as a note, is it's not clear whether in Flaubert's universe there is any way of actually satisfying your ideals. Whether ideals are anything else besides fantasies. It's possible he might have some vision of that. At least it's not clear from the extent that we've read in the book, but that there's maybe some way, there's some alternative. You do have to raise questions about, well, what about your daughter? People get satisfaction from daughters, or doing more music or writing a book or something. But he doesn't present that. He doesn't talk about that as a serious option. So it's not clear whether I tend to believe that he just thinks ideals are just things that are always at a distance. They don't have to do with reality. Abstractions aren't relevant to concretes.
But that's a source of great misery.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's intense misery. But I'm just saying that when we're sort of judging or thinking about Emma, it's well, does she have any alternative? Flaubert isn't presenting an alternative. Flaubert isn't saying well, this superficial woman, there are deeper things in life. He never presents the deeper things.
No, she's just acting out on the desire to fulfill the longings, but it's not that she's choosing wrongly, that there are other ways she could fulfill the longings. It's just this continual thrashing. It just feels like a thrashing that's what life is, thrashing against tedium.
Yeah, so I just wanted to just be careful when you're thinking about her, and just this is the best she could do, arguably, at least in Flaubert's universe.
Right.
Not in the universe, but at least in Flaubert's universe. universe.
Right. Joseph, who did we have next?
Oh, we got Wendy next.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what Ray was saying, that's it, that was part of my relief, was that, okay, even if it's not real, if it's momentary, it is this glimmer of enjoyment in life just for a moment. Also in the chat, Anne had put in the riding habit decided her, which is a quote from, you know, oh, it's so painful when Charles is trying to convince her to go for the ride. You're like, no. But anyway, I found that really interesting too, that idea that was the turning point. And I think it's meant to show sort of the shallowness of this, and also that somehow that would make the picture complete, you know, like she would be, you know, it look right, the part correct. So I thought that was an interesting thing. It did stand out to me that that somehow that was the key point to doing this, you know.
Well, it connects
the
to
outfit.
it connects to that line when she was pregnant and couldn't enjoy the thrills of maternal joy because she couldn't afford a fancy layette. So the thrills and the material things that make you look the part, and also it integrates with the party, right? Her confusing luxuries of wealth with matters of the heart, or, you know, they're sort of intertwined with each other in her mind. And I think that's part of what makes her fall for Rodolphe in the first place, is just, wasn't there something about him smelling? Oh yeah, the pomade in his hair smelled like the people from the party.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So it just, those connotations of wealth and luxury and excitement, and that's what gives it the thrill, part of what gives it the thrill. Okay, well, we still have a couple comments, it looks like. I'm going to just quickly say the assignment, very conveniently, will be chapter 11 through 15, which brings us to part 3. So we'll stop at part 3. In my version, it's 161 to 214. Also, Grace, I have not mentioned this to you yet, but I need to not have a session. No, that's not true. We have a session next week. Ignore me. The session, 2 weeks from now, I have to cancel because I'm flying to London to officiate a wedding, which is very exciting. So I'll miss that one. I don't think I'll be doing readings from Madame Bovary. Seems like a bad idea for a wedding ceremony. And we'll resume the week after that. But yes, next week is on. Okay, last comments. Joseph, who's next?
Stefan's next.
Okay.
I wanted to make a philosophical observation about this whole idea of value, you know, what Ray said about values not being achievable in this universe. And I wonder, you know, if that's one of the big problems I think people have with romanticism, and especially Ayn Rand's novels, where Ayn Rand once said that when people listen to like folk music or something like that, they get a relief. Whereas somebody who's like, I guess, more of the objectivist view would feel kind of like a negative response to that. And I think people see that what's happening to Emma in this novel is what they experience in life, and that creates a certain relief. And the whole idea that values are achievable and morality and ideals are achievable and you can actually achieve happiness seems so foreign to people. And that's obviously a philosophical problem. But I don't know, Ray said that, and it made me think of what Rand said about folk music, and in that way, you know, that they get a sort of relief. Like, I recognize this kind of person in real life, and I like that. And that's why I think why a lot of people like naturalism in that way. So
yeah, I'm sure there are people who read this and identify in some way with with Emma, although I don't, is that a common occurrence? I don't know, but certainly the phenomenon, I know exactly what you're describing, that it takes a certain philosophic or psychological orientation to believe the achievement of values is possible. And it takes a commitment to the effort of achieving values to actually achieve them. So there are definitely people who take satisfaction in reading art that reassures them they need not, that the reason they're not experiencing that is that it's not possible. And that if it is possible, or that it's not possible, relieves them of the sorrow of not having that in their life and of the effort of having to try to achieve it.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking, because then it relieves you of having to put any effort into trying, well, that's just how people are. And just real quick, that's why I think we all recognize these people. And that's what I love about this, because it's like Hardy in the sense that he really gets people, and that's great. But it's also like, I don't like this about people.
Sure. Well, one of the things that I really appreciate about being so shocked out of my own perspective with this novel is that it does help you understand. I mean, it can make you identify more clearly what you do or don't like in other people, but it can also make you more empathetic, or at least it can facilitate earnest communication with other people, because sometimes it is hard to put yourself outside of your own context of thinking. And this one is so foreign to my own way of thinking that I could imagine having a conversation with someone and thinking, oh, they have a Flaubert attitude toward the world, and that just kind of reorienting everything I might say or do to try to communicate with them.
Yeah.
So it is really good intellectually, spiritually, philosophically to inhabit a totally different world.
Yeah.
Ray, did you have one more comment before we sign off?
Yeah, just two things. One is that, well, I really liked Stephen's comments. But one thing about the superficiality of like, oh, the writing habit decides her, or the perfume from the place, wherever, from the dance. It's one part of that is because abstractions are things from a distance, they are superficial. That's part of her superficiality is connected with the abstractions of, it's like, Prince Charming. Most of what there's no. If you actually met Prince Charming, he's a very superficial person. Like most of what makes him appealing is his beauty and the blonde hair and this powerful physique. It's not ideals or character.
Right.
Another thing, just in terms of my relation, how I relate to Madame Bovary, is just I've been through some stuff in my life, and there are times where I remember actually thinking at moments like, values are a daydream. There have been those moments in my life, and I do, like, when I read this, it's like, yes, that captures that experience perfectly. That captures that sense I had at that moment. Exactly, not quite exactly. I never quite felt Flaubertian. Maybe more mom, Somerset Maugham kind of attitude. But I do relate to that. At least I can relate to an earlier version of myself feeling that way about things.
So it's good for self-identity, for self-identification, or just understanding yourself better, ideally, so that you can purge that element of your soul forever. Okay, well, no, I'm going to end on that note, right? No rebuttal.
Let's not think about it. That's not a healthy way purging, but in a sense, yeah.
Okay. All right. So I will see everybody next week for up through part 3. Thank you again. So fun.